DevOps Dispatch presents Voices from the Industry.
These are not paid actors.
All right, coming to you live from Austin, Texas, and Mountain View. I'm here with Sheng Liang. How are you, sir?
Very good. It was great talking to you again, Barton.
Yeah, it's funny. Just today I looked and said, when was the last time we did an interview? And it was 8 years ago.
Wow.
And at that point, Rancher was 8 months old.
Wow.
And you were explaining to me what it was. And then I think I did the next year, I did an interview with Darren Shepard, one of your partners. And then there was a DevOps engineer that I talked to the next couple of years. So I do interviews to track the
yeah, you should definitely talk to Darren. He's such a thought leader. He's the creative force pretty much behind everything we do. You know, he's kind of the
Well, so if speaking of which, you have a group of people that you've moved with, Shannon being another one, right?
Yes.
So was this your history? Of course, it goes way back. We were talking about how we were at Sun at the same time. You were doing JVM and then a mobile instantiation of it. And then from there, you had a couple of other things that you worked at, engineering groups you led, and then cloud.com.
Right.
And
so it was really mobile. I was working back then, was working on mobile services, like, you know, creating a ringtone or mobile game download service for Singular wireless AT&T.
Oh gosh, I remember those days.
You know, that kind of stuff, right? So it kind of started from my J2ME kind of background back then. So obviously, you know, in those days we were still running on Sun servers, and pretty soon, you know, Linux took over. You know, Dell, that kind of stuff took over, and then then AWS came out, EC2 came out. That was very eye-opening. So that actually was what got me into cloud. So I started.
So this is around 2006. I remember it came out. When did you start?
Yeah. So I started cloud.com in 2008.
Oh, wow. So pretty early days.
Yeah. So it was early enough. Like I remember Dell bought the domain cloudcomputing.com at the time.
Oh,
But luckily, cloud.com was actually available. Dell hasn't bought it. Someone else had it. So we bought it from him. So Shannon was doing sales and was the first business hire. And then Will, a person I worked with since my mobile days, he was the first engineering hire. So
what's his last name?
Will Chan.
Okay.
And then Darren Shepard was actually one of our first customers. So we sold our cloud stack. That was before OpenStack, right? We sold our cloud stack to GoDaddy. So they used it to build their cloud to compete against EC2 at the time, because GoDaddy, it was natural, right? They were a hosting company. I mean, we thought every hosting company would be a cloud provider. So that's this group got together. It was myself, Will Chan, and then Shannon Williams and Darren Shepard. So four of us have kind of worked together since then. So we started Rancher together a few years later. And then when we started Acorn Labs, also was four of us started it together.
Cool. So from cloud.com, you got acquired by Citrix. And then from there, what was the need that you identified to create Rancher? Was there was something
Docker. It was Docker, yeah, because you know, at the time, I mean, there's a bit of a history. At the time, there really weren't many good ways to manage applications on infrastructure. So sort of the prevailing approach was using infrastructure as code. So that was sort of like, you know, it was even before Terraform, right? So back then, the infrastructure as code was mostly Chef, Puppet, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then when Docker came out, it was just clearly superior. You know, we couldn't really get any developers back then to understand Chef Puppet. It was just way too difficult, way too esoteric. And but Docker was such a big hit, it just took off immediately. And then we saw we immediately saw the need to build orchestrators. That was also before Kubernetes. So we actually built an orchestrator ourselves, but then of course it was very clear Kubernetes was going to take over.
So when you
we
say the
pivoted.
orchestrator, was this when you're at Citrix, or this was already at
No,
Ranch?
no, at Rancher. Rancher, we built something called Cattle, which we threw away. Like just startups are full of pivots, but we started.
That's
Yeah,
right. We're going to get to your latest pivot in a
yeah, but
second.
our first product, our very first product at Rancher was a container orchestrator that competed against Kubernetes, called a Cattle. And we sold it. It actually sold pretty well. We sold it for a couple of years, and then we pivoted, probably harder than anyone else. Like Docker didn't pivot. Mesosphere never really pivoted well. So it kind of cleared the competitive space for us.
Yeah, on a somewhat adjacent note, I know OpenShift switched from their own homegrown containers and their homegrown orchestrator and went all in at the first KubeCon on Kubernetes, which I think
they did it even earlier. I mean, that was sort of the betting, and that ended up saving Red Hat, right? Like, I mean, so yeah, they did it even. I mean, they had a lot more credibility. To be fair, they brought in, the enterprise stuff that Google really needed, and I think they were treated more like a partner by Google. Whereas I think when we finally picked up Kubernetes, it was already like a year or two later, and we were still one of many people trying to do the same thing. So we were not, back then, we were not in the same league as certainly we still probably are not, but I don't think Rancho was toward the end. Rancho was viewed pretty seriously as a contender. I see people mention Rancher and Tanzu and OpenShift, but back in early days, man, Red Hat was clearly defined enterprise.
Yeah, and I think that and once again we'll get to your most recent pivot, but their idea to pivot, it's tough to say we're going to throw away all the stuff that we've been working on forever. We're going to take a chance on this new stuff because you work so hard on it, and it's not a foregone conclusion that this new Kubernetes thing and this Docker thing is worth throwing all your stuff away for. There was also, I remember, Rancher OS,
right,
which is, I remember Red Hat had Atomic. There's Rancher OS.
Yeah,
I forget, there was a bunch of Core OS. Yeah. And so was that?
That never really got anywhere. It was it was a good idea, but I don't really think there was enough of a use case to create micro operating systems to run containers. I think at the end of the day, most people still ran containers on CentOS, RHEL, SUSE, Ubuntu. It's just very mature. Like I think Docker containers was kind of ruling the application layer, kind of kicking. Like we don't hear about companies like Chef Puppet anymore, right? I don't even know what happened to them. But so that kind of went away. But the operating enterprise operating systems or the open source Linux operating systems, I mean, there's just really a lot more to it than just making it small. So
yeah, and I think Nano was the one from Microsoft, and they all have gone. You don't hear about these anymore. So it's interesting.
It's more of a novelty, I think, in retrospect.
Yeah, how small can you make it? So it's like 25 megabits or something, megabytes.
Yeah.
So then from Rancher, you got acquired by Citrix. You were there for a couple.
SUSE. Rancher was
sorry. Yes, by SUSE. You were there for a couple of years, and you identified this opportunity of making make it easier for developers to package and deploy apps on Kubernetes. Do I have that correct?
Yes, because I mean, Kubernetes has been so successful, but developers, to be honest, never liked it. Just as we know very well, it's like developers would go. I mean, honestly, they probably just most developers prefer to deal with source code and then IDEs and checking their coding to GitHub. they honestly, they can probably be convinced to go as far as Docker and Docker Compose, right?
Right.
But they're not gonna write Kubernetes YAML files or Helm charts. So it was always like you build this thing, you throw it over the wall, and we thought we can build this technology that can, based on our experience, can kind of finally unify dev and ops with with a consistent artifact, and then all the tooling around it. So I mean, it was great. It's a great product. It still is a great product. The
And so just for
but
people to know, this is Acorn we're talking
this is
about, which
Acorn, yeah.
18 months ago, 2 years ago, you started?
Yeah, we started 18 months ago. So we spent 18 months building it, and we were almost about 3 months ago, we were ready to I mean, it was open source and was also in public beta for our enterprise product, and people were using it, but then maybe about 2-3 months ago, we realized we're gonna have to pull back. So we went
So
through
was
this.
it that then said, so how did you get to the new place? I know there's GPTScript, which I'd love to hear more about, but was that just sort of a side thing? And while you were thinking of,
No,
well, what do we
so
do? Or how did that?
obviously, like a lot, I mean, I'm sure Dell includes big companies, small companies, you can't ignore this AI stuff, right? You have to think
Oh, yeah.
how
Oh,
is
yeah.
AI relevant to you? So the very obvious thing we asked ourselves is something like Acorn relevant in hosting AI workloads? I mean, that would be a most obvious thing, like
Right.
in the context of LLM, right? So I think
Right.
that's what we found out the hard way. It actually wasn't. And
Yeah.
it was not for the reason we knew, mainly because really I mean, I said earlier, developers didn't want to deal with Kubernetes, and they don't even like Docker that much. They can be convinced to use it, but really a lot of the AI developers, I mean, their preferred platform is notebook, right? And they write mostly deal with Python source. And these guys really didn't want to have anything to do with any sort of even packaged binary. Those whole concepts are very alien to them. So
Particularly if you have
it
people in
definitely felt
machine
like we
learning,
weren't adding much value.
I was
That
just going to
was
say data scientists are even more removed than you
Oh,
have.
yeah. I mean, data scientists will be a whole different extreme. I'm even talking about people who are, not necessarily data scientists, like folks who are using like Llama Index or something, like actually trying to build some apps on large language model,
Right.
And try to like build it. Like these days, you go to you go to Expedia, or you go to any one of these websites or banks. I mean, there are more and more AI functionality that's rolling out. I'm talking about those kind of developers, right?
Right.
They're not necessarily not the UI people, but people who are, you can imagine they're hooking up their enterprise knowledge with the large language model somehow. But those people really didn't want anything to do with containers, unfortunately. So we realized that was not the right technology, and we kind of started experimenting. And it's tough because it's not like, yeah, we know what the right direction is, but doesn't mean we have the insight to add any value. So it took us a while. And I think finally the opportunity came last November. Like it took almost a year for us to just think like what we can do. But in November, there was a OpenAI developer conference. And then remember, in that conference, they released a new model called GPT-4 Turbo, and it had a great feature that was just amazing. Like it had this feature of, it's called function calling. I'm sure you heard about it. For basically for language models to not only recall from its own memory, but you can say, answer this question, but I can give you a few tools. Like these are functions. Think about like, I'll ask you what the current temperature is, but like what the language model would say, I have no idea, because that's just the information I do not have, right? It can hallucinate, but you probably don't want it to do that. So then what you can do with function calls is you can say, oh, what's the current temperature? There is a function called get current weather or weather function, right? So it'll just call weather function to get. So, but you see, there's multiple things involved here. One is it kind of needs to understand it can call that. But second, there's also language and conceptual understanding involved, because I asked about temperature and I give it weather, right? So it knows weather, like temperature is part of weather. If it called the weather, there's a good chance it can get temperature back, you know? And these function calls are almost like, I mean, they're marvelous because you know, so these function calls, they always return JSON and stuff, but there's no schema. Like it really, at the end, it doesn't matter what you return it, as long as if a human reads it, can understand that the language model can also understand. So it'll basically pick out the temperature out. I mean, if you didn't respond temperature, then it still say, I don't know. I made the call to the function. I still don't know. But if you know, if get current weather or weather returned the temperature, then it's able to tell you the temperature. So this is just, you know, it's like, wow, this is really powerful. It's almost like, you know, it's almost to me feel like human went from, you know, in our history of evolution, went from just being able to do things and figure out how to use tools, right? That's a big step. Like, you couple, you know, intelligence with tools, then you know, you get your skills really get amplified. So anyway, so sort of like, so GPTScript. Then we created this GPTScript. We realized now we finally have the foundation to build a scripting language that enabled people to program LLM. That's more than just a prompt, because we can't, if it's just a prompt, you can just paste it into the chat window, you get the result back. So with the function call ability, you have the ability now to do back and forth. You can do execution, you can do communication, you can do notification, you can do all kinds of stuff. So it kind of become a programming framework, really. So anyway, and finally, I think finally it made, you know, programming in natural language possible.
So you went to this conference, you've learned about functions, you thought we should do something that using natural language models as a goal, or what were, once you saw this stuff and you wanted to make something that was easier to work with, how much of it was just sort of
so what
testing and
occurred
going
to us
through?
was, you know, like Jensen Huang is always now being quoted saying, in the future, you know, I mean, I think he's gone a bit extreme. He said, like, you don't even need to learn coding anymore or something, right? You remember? I remember reading something like that. So, but the idea of being able to program with a natural language without even, not as a co-pilot, because if co-pilot generates code, then you still have to understand code. And sometimes, to be honest, finding bugs in other people's code is pretty tricky, you know. So I'd rather be writing code than fixing bugs for me. So anyway, but the idea is, if you actually write what you want to do in English, if it executes it, that's kind of pretty cool, you know. So that's what motivated. That's what GPTScript is about. So basically, we believed if it can somehow use this function, because that's really all you need. Imagine if your function calls, then its capability is unlimited, right? Like you can write down what you want to do, and then you, with function calls, you can abstract. You can like in GPTScript, there's only one concept called tool, also called function. It's all the same. Like think of a lambda function. Okay, basically something that takes input and produces output. And then these functions could be implemented either using like a Python or Java, it doesn't matter, like shell script, JavaScript, or you could implement those functions using using English prompt or Japanese prompt. And then they can all call each other, because it's always easy for Python to call the language model. But now with the function call capability in language models, they can also intelligently invoke functions. So it kind of become, it really finally made this, made this, you know, natural language programming possible. So that's what opened the door for us.
So are there other natural language models that you can point to that you use for reference, or was this this was something you took it from somewhere else, and then this is your application of it where it's a good fit with AI.
So I mean, I would say the best way to think about it is like, I mean, if you think the world has two kinds of tasks. I mean, there's a kind of task that is just fairly mechanical, like, add up from 1 to 1,000,000. Or I mean, just mathematical tasks, sorting something, things that we know how to solve with data structures and algorithms, right? So those should be code. I think those should definitely, I mean, to be honest, most of these ChatGPT is not very good at.
No.
It cannot even do, you cannot even add or multiply large numbers. I think.
Well, just as an aside, I was just playing around with Genesis, and I said, make me a picture of the 3 little pigs like gangsters. And then it gave me 2 pigs. And I said, well, I like the way they look. They look like gangsters, but there's only 2 here. And, oh, I'm sorry. Here's 3 pigs. Now there's 4 pigs.
Yeah.
And it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
they could take
certain
it and make
things
this
is just not very
complicated
good
stuff.
at.
But
exactly. Yeah. And those, I don't know if you want to feed it to a language. I don't know if you want to train, the language model to be able to do that, to be able to add large numbers, because it's very hard for humans to do it too, right? So
right.
So that's one thing. But then there's a set of tasks that language models are actually very good at. Like, obviously we know the generative stuff, right? Writing things that generally easy to describe, but hard to do, or it's not clear how you can do it, all the way to like autonomous driving. Or like, Darren now is, believe it or not, he's writing a GPT script thing that does, for those of us in Kubernetes will appreciate, does some Kubernetes operators. So, like CoreOS invented this operator controller framework that's supposed to like fully automate function operation of of these complicated software. That was what they created for. Like, you're supposed to be able to build some controllers or operators for etcd or for MySQL clusters and stuff, and it's able to operate it, right? And those are actually very difficult. Like, I've honestly never seen a good operator that can truly take over the role of a human. Like, these are just very nebulous tasks, right? So you could imagine that AI might be able to do it. So I can totally see, like, the world basically has 2 types of tasks. One type of task that's naturally good for the CPU to do, and there's another type of task that's naturally appropriate to be specified by prompts and be executed on the GPU. You actually don't want to mix them up, because if you run the tasks, you try to use GPU to do like addition, it's going to be so expensive.
Right.
Like, believe it or not, to stress test GPTScript, I actually, just to test it, I wrote a factorial function. That's got to be the world's most expensive factorial function, because it was taking literally probably millions of matrix multiplications, to calculate factorial 3, right? It's costing me probably $1 to get that result back. Factorial of 3 is 6, So,
oh my gosh.
So you could do that, but you may not want to do it.
This was like a factorial of 10,000 and 57.
Oh, then it'll suck up the whole. Yeah, it can really suck up the whole computing power. So anyway, so you could, like I said, you could do that. But so I think the future world should be like, there's always going to be, Java code, Python code, and more of these will be generated by copilots, I have no doubt. And when AGI happens, they'll be 100% generated by machines. And then there'll be also things machines are good at. And with GPTScript, you can very naturally, very easily mix those.
So then back to the pivot. So you had the this idea of making things easy to package for Kubernetes. Right. Wasn't quite getting the traction you were looking for.
With AI. I mean, it was getting great traction with the Kubernetes.
Okay.
Just not.
So you saw the need to be involved in AI, and you saw what you've got. It's not really gonna fit. And so you started, after the OpenAI conference, you had this epiphany that, hey, let's try to do this language part. And then when did it get to the idea of creating an LLM stack, or I saw somewhere else you called it an LLM app platform. Is that the
Yeah,
goal?
I mean, it's because you start with a language, right? Pretty soon, the whole point we create GPTScript is for people to write these kind of LLM apps. And I give you an idea what we mean by LLM apps. So LLM apps these days, the definition of LLM app is an app that's written and that uses LLM in some way. So for example, if you want to, if you want to write an app to correct grammar for you, that would be an LLM app. ChatGPT is obviously an LLM app, right? And then so these days, the most common kind of LLM app has something to do with retrieval. So this has to do with like usually a business or even person. Like I want my personal information. I want a ChatGPT to be able to answer questions about my personal data, about my personal docs, or about my business's docs. So that's called retrieval augmented generation, RAG. And that's pretty popular, So that's one type. I'd say, I mean, if you look at these AI, the wave of AI right now, most VC money is going to, I would say, vast majority of those companies are solving this RAG problem in one form or another. Basically, it's all about ChatGPT experience on your private data.
So, and to that point, I'm looking here what you wrote was the other one about LLM stack that can be run by organizations to provide AI-powered services that utilize private data, that would be RAG, corporate intranets, internal databases, and critical applications. So is ChatGPT, GPTScript targeted at internal?
You can certainly use it to build apps like that. You can certainly use it to build RAG. Now, this is not the only way to build RAG, but but there's a gazillion other frameworks out there, and they're like these languages and frameworks. There's pros and cons, and it takes some time to get familiar with. So our what's great about GPTScript is it's just so user friendly because you can't get any more direct than that, because you just write your prompt as if you're writing code versus traditionally what you would do is you would compose these prompts as a string, and you'd like concatenate them together, and then you make a Python call, you send it to something, right, and then you get the response back. Whereas in GPTScript, those things become kind of like elevated first class concepts. So you're almost like directly dealing with the model as if it's like the CPU, it's just running things for you. So it's quite a different experience, and a lot of people find it very straightforward and very easy. That's why it's gaining traction. Solomon Hykes, the founder of Docker, he's a big fan of what we do. He's been so nice to us. Cool. Just last week I was at a meetup with him, and he was demoing his stuff, and he actually spent a lot of time showing off. He's demoing. He was supposed to be just demoing his Dagger CI framework, but he integrated GPTScript, and it was just showing how cool GPTScript is working in conjunction with Dagger. So we kind of brought some the AI function. Now Dagger is an LLM app, right? It's kind of AI enabled it. So that's pretty cool. Like we're definitely seeing a lot of excitement with new technology, and I think I think that's mostly because just the popularity of AI. It's nothing we did. It's just AI itself is just very attractive.
But you found a very unique way of getting into it. That's a niche that really wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's required. I don't know. I think it's too early to tell. We got it right or something. It's just too early. But you always, our view is you always have to have an angle, right? Otherwise, you can't go in without some amount of insight or creativity, right? So
unless you're a huge company and then you use your weight to do the other stuff. But if you're small, you need to be nimble, which is the advantage, right? Because you are able to pivot.
So we have to, I think at least it bought us enough credibility. It's almost like it's almost like it's like an admission ticket into,
Right. Well,
so we
it's
could
yeah.
try to build an AI business, but we're not AI people. Luckily the
That's what I
world
was
has
going to
very
ask.
few
Have you
AI people.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're very hard to get these days because everybody wants them. I know we're hiring AI people, and I'm sure every other company in the world is. So is it then? So GPT-script isn't specifically or tuned for internal private clouds data centers, or is it? Is that
No,
the idea?
actually,
Is the focus?
no, actually not, because we've had so far. I told you, like, this is really a big innovation coming out of OpenAI, and then of course very quickly all other models like Mistral, Llama, Claude, they all claim different degrees of support,
Mhm.
but they're not at the same level. So as of right now, we have problem running a local model or hosted models other than OpenAI, GPT-4 or GPT
Mhm.
3.5 with GPT-script. Right now, the only model that works with GPT-script only model that works really well is GPT-4. And GPT
Okay.
3.5 sort of also works. Everything else is not quite there. But we hope everyone will catch up. Then you have a true choice of models, especially for enterprise who want a lot of enterprise legitimately want on-premise. They don't
Right.
want the data to be sent to OpenAI, right? But we're
Right.
very early. So I'm very confident within months, we should get much better choice of models. But as of today, you can really only use OpenAI.
So would you then, because GPT-5, I don't know how far it is from being released or if it's just being worked on, do you then get information now that you're working what you are? Will they give you more information, or there's
No, we're
developer
not.
kits or
We got a long way to go. Yeah, to
okay.
have. I think it's I think OpenAI is really sort of chartering they're advancing just so much faster than anyone else, and I think the conventional wisdom is sooner or later this will equalize,
Hmm.
so if that happens, great. Yeah, I guess if not, then maybe they'll get to AGI and then completely change the game.
Right. And yeah. Um, so then you're working with Chat GPT, and then you've got your part. And then as far as large language models with the LLM, Llama and Mistral, and what are some of the other ones? So the Chat GPT is the chatbot on top, right?
ChatGPT ChatGPT is the chatbot on GPT-4. So GPT-script actually does not work with ChatGPT directly. It
Mhm.
works with the model, GPT-4 model directly.
Okay.
So then what people typically do is say, if you want to build a chatbot like ChatGPT, but with your own data, then they can use GPT-script to do it.
Okay.
So, but then you don't go through ChatGPT anymore because the UI is worth nothing, right?
Right.
So
Right.
it's really the model and the logic behind it, and the data, especially the data behind it, right? So I mean, if you're already doing your own data, then you might. So we'll of course give them a Chat UI. That doesn't cost anything,
Right.
okay? So so
So,
so then like I said, we're right now pretty much this is the GPT-4 is the only thing that works, but we're working very hard. Where one thing we got to do is so we're one of the highest priorities, we're producing a benchmark. AI
mhm.
people are driven by benchmarks. Right
Mhm.
now, there's really no good benchmark for function calls. There's one out there, but it's very basic. So everyone just passes and they feel good.
Mhm.
So we want to,
It's
because
pass
GPT
fail,
script,
right?
yeah. So GPT script, we obviously exercise a bit harder. So once we can show, like, look, imagine if, like, let's just say if OpenAI is at 80 and someone else is at 70, they might not feel as motivated to improve as if
Right.
OpenAI was at 90 and they're at 20. Then
Right.
hopefully, right? So we're working on things like that. And also we're working on a product called the GPT Studio,
Hmm.
where you can just it's really developer focused. you can download and install on a Mac or PC and put in your, OpenAI API key. Then you can start to develop these apps like RAG, mainly a chatbot for your private data. And the private data could include the simplest form is I just upload a bunch of documents, but it could be something like I have a corporate intranet, and then just point this stuff to the internet, say that is, or these pages on the intranet, or even could be like, or you can look at my Salesforce account or my Workday account and use my account because this is specifically for me. So that's kind of how we get around the RBAC issues. Like everything you build with GPT Studio, at least the client side would just be your credential. So anyway, so that could be one of the apps people are able to build. And there's a lot of other apps. Like just yesterday, I had a chat with another company, and they are really looking for help. So they build healthcare chatbots. And you would think, chatbots, isn't ChatGPT a chatbot? But ChatGPT is very good, very smart. But it's this kind of open ended chat is not what you would want for, say, customer support. What you want for customer support, you want something that's more grounded in a goal, right? And it probably shouldn't answer a random question. Certainly
shouldn't hallucinate.
Yeah, definitely should not. But even more importantly, it should lead the user down toward resolution. It should ask exactly what it needs, right? And it should know when to escalate. So there's sort of a workflow angle. There's a lot of knowledge. There's knowledge base behind it. It's actually a lot trickier. So anyway, and there were tools that's out there that people use to build it, also based on like last generation of AI, but they're very rigid. So I think we can do something better with with GPT-4 and GPTScript. So those are sort of things I think people will be able to develop with GPT Studio. So anyway, so we're developing the studio, which is it's a sign of an early stage market is when people are there developing languages and tools. Just go back to like early days of internet. People are developing these, JavaScripts and HTML2s and 3s, and they develop like front page and stuff, right? So we're sort of at that stage.
So yeah, no, it's a fascinating time, and you're getting in at the ground floor. I mean, obviously there's some foundational products like ChatGPT, and you've got other people similar to that, like I want to say anthropomorphic, but that's not it. I'm forgetting. Anthropic, yeah. So you've got some, and then of course Google and Microsoft. But it'll be interesting to see then where the various pieces fit within it and how they extend it. So it sounds like what you're right now. You've made the big pivot, and you've got some directions that you're looking at, but it's still very much in the MVP stage, agile sort of go around and see what sticks and try a couple of different things. You have some directions you're thinking are the ways to go, but you are also trying out at this point.
Yeah, so that's I mean, we have very supportive investors. Luckily, they allow us to do that.
That's what I was going to ask is.
Yeah, I think one thing. I think one thing that people always struggle. A lot of people struggle in the AI space right now is it's once a while you always see these articles like this company is worth that much and they don't have any revenue, right? Like you do hear about that a lot. So we're very mindful.
That was the .com era, and that didn't work out too well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why we're focused on the enterprise. There's definitely enough real, we're at a small scale, but I think if we actually focus on making people's life better, could produce a tool that folks are willing to use, enterprise people are willing to use, help them organize and automate. Well, I mean, I'm very optimistic about the value we're gonna create until AGI, then all bets are off.
Right. So to take this new direction, are you following a path maybe that you did with Rancher? In other words, you started to try the Rancher OS, you tried that, or is this completely different in that it's so new and so vast?
No, it's the same. It's what we like is it's the same with Acorn. Like we like to start with an open source project, because open source gives you a very quick and very cheap early feedback. That's very important.
And that's what I was going to ask about.
And it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost us anything. Obviously you don't make money, but you're not ready anyway. And the great thing about not making money is it doesn't cost you anything to stop doing it. We can, if look like something someday is not working out, we can stop it, right? So and if look like it's working, so in the history of Rancher, there were 3 projects. We probably worked on dozens of projects. Most of them fizzled out, including Rancher OS. But the 3 projects that ended up driving revenue were Rancher, K3S, and Longhorn. So all the other projects kind of died. So
that's interesting how that you launched these various different things, and you weren't a huge company, obviously, and you had to decide at key times that when you were gonna cut this, when you were gonna go with that.
No, but you got to understand, this is sort of more philosophical, but you got to understand these days, you got to think about we're in very similar business, even you got to really think about software business these days is more like a content business. It's no different from producing YouTube videos. It's you just got to produce and one of them, there's always some videos will be bigger hits than other videos, but the difference then, so the initial thing is you're just producing that content, and it's got nothing to do with how much effort you put into it, right? Generally good if you put more effort, generally you get better results, but there's still no guarantee. You can try to make the most technically superior movie in the world, but doesn't mean people are going to watch it. So it's a bit like content business. And the thing with software is unlike a movie, is once a movie or a novel is written or music is composed, you can't change it. So the cool thing is
it's immutable.
Yeah, the cool thing with software is we can basically throw it out there, and then we can basically really start to build a business after we're reasonably certain, right? So that is what becomes really cool.
Right. Once again, if you have understandable investors,
this is not hardly unique insight, because that's what VCs do these days. They go to GitHub and look at the latest popular projects and try to fund them. Same idea, right?
But to do it right and to still be here, right? You've done it with a couple of projects. You're doing it on a third. So
no, it's also
a lot of people do it.
But in reality, more than we've done 3 companies, but each of these companies, even Cloud.com had multiple projects. It took many projects. It's the same thing, because otherwise you can't really settle on. So it's not, for us, it's not even a pivot. This is so big, so it's like a pivot, but we're constantly pivoting,
Right.
Because we're just for example, does Disney, let's just say, made a cartoon one year, next year they made a Marvel, whatever. It's not is that a pivot? Not really. They just try all kinds of stuff, right?
Right. But then they're Disney and they're so big, but yet you all are small, and so you're on one respect, you're more agile.
It's like a content provider, And I think one thing is you also really gotta believe, one thing is the productivity is, without insight, there's no productivity. Because if you're copying other people's stuff in software, your productivity is 0, no matter how much you create, right? Because other people can just copy a piece of software. So you recreated this thing, your value is still 0, you see?
Right.
But if you have a piece of insight, the productivity these days is so big. You got it, not even, to be honest, these are not even co-pilots, but just the tools, good old-fashioned tools and libraries and IDEs and frameworks, everything that we built over the last 30 years, it's so incredible. Even without any AI technology, a good developer today is probably, orders of magnitude more productive, right, than than
So,
decades ago.
so is there, as far as getting feedback on it, obviously the community you're building on GitHub, you want, and Discord, you're getting people giving feedback that way. Are you meeting with companies and just saying, hey, here's what we're doing, talking to CTO orgs? Are there like things with Dagger? You go there and you just happen to be at a meetup and then you share ideas. So where are you
Yeah.
getting your input from, and what are your
Yeah,
short-term goals?
it is a bit of a science and art, because
Mhm.
I don't think it's a matter of, you know, you definitely deliberately have to look for feedback, and then you have to take the feedback the right way. Because if
Mhm.
you're not willing to, like, people are generally very polite,
Mhm.
right? Nobody wants to tell you this is not great. I mean, if you go just even present, like, you can interpret the feedback in the most positive way,
Right.
so yeah, so it's a bit of a, normally the way around it is, are you willing to pay? And of course, nobody will be willing to pay if they really don't think. But the thing is now, well, people are not paying. But then you find other things like, do they use? Like, it turns out if you use it for free, it's quite a bit of a commitment too, right? So use is almost as good as paying, you know?
Right. Well, so
So
how is the community right now? Is it a decent size, or is it starting off
I
pretty
don't know. It's
small?
still this project. So we only officially unveiled it about a month ago.
Okay.
It's at like over 2,000 GitHub stars now, which would be good by cloud native standard,
Hmm.
but I think it's so-so, I would say, by AI standard. But the one of the big reason is because it's a bit of a language and framework. We knew that,
Hmm.
like most people can't consume it yet. We have to build up stuff around it
Right.
so it's more
Right.
consumable, right? So it's just not there. Like, we don't have a debugger. Like, there's just so many. People say, "Oh, it's a cute idea," but they'll give us a star, but they can't really use it. So
Right.
so 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 we're just working as fast as we can. I think in a few months, we'll have a fully featured studio. Then we'll have a bunch of reference apps. I'm not
Hmm.
sure we're going to be shipping apps ourselves.
Hmm.
But basically the AI world, like everyone knows, has 4 layers, right? Chips,
Hmm.
models, frameworks, and apps.
Right.
And we're sort of at the framework layer, kind of. It's actually one of the toughest layers, unfortunately. But that's that's the kind of people we are, right?
You like a good challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like you gotta be true to yourself, like, this is what we do, and being tough doesn't mean there's no opportunity. That could be less competition. Obviously, the app layer has a lot of opportunity, but also has the
Right. Yep.
most competition, right? So and and it's not the toughest. I think the chip layer is even harder. So or the
Well, and
model layer is infinitely harder. So
so
so so, so
speaking of which, there was this thing that was on your blog that you wrote. It sounds like you're talking about a shift to a GPU-centric world. You say that since the majority of the computing power, costs, and execution time will be spent on GPUs, we now have the opportunity to take a fresh look at the cloud-native computing stack, from chips, data center, OSs, cluster management, and application platforms. So do you see you're seeing a
Yeah,
seismic
that
shift
really,
that?
I mean, that's slightly longer term. I think once we understand this stuff a lot better, I really think it's going to be a very different world. If think about it, like, even today, you can just see, like, amount of compute on CPU and GPU is very rapidly changing, right?
Right.
Is
Yep.
noticeably changing. And I don't have the real data, but even the last quarter, I look at the quarterly public announcements out of Amazon and Microsoft. So
Mhm.
look like AWS grew 13% year over year, and Azure grew 30% year over year. And the Azure people, they don't break down any further than that.
Right.
But Azure people did say, like, at least 6% of that came out of, like, things related to AI. So I would assume, like, I'm consuming OpenAI every day.
Right.
If it weren't for that, I would have no reason to be, and that became Azure workload. I would have,
Mhm.
I would not have been contributing any Azure workload. I've always been an AWS fan, right? I still
Right.
use AWS, but then all of a sudden, OpenAI is only available on Azure.
That's the
So
killer app that gets you to
so
use
that's,
their
that
platform.
kind of changes the game for me. So anyway, that's the sort of stuff. That's what I mean. It's like because we never really saw a way for AWS to be disrupted, but
Yeah.
maybe until now, So.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to sync up in 6 months or a year or whenever to see how this has gone. I think this sounds like another one of those Harvard Business School cases that you can see about how you go through in a technology space and be agile and pivot and how you make it through to the other side. Um, so just to end with, what in 3 months or a year, where would you like to be as far as what you know or what you're offering or
I think we should ship the studio and I think GPT-script right now is cool idea. It's not yet useful. It's not yet
Mhm.
super useful because it's really hard to do a language. You can
Yeah.
imagine. It's one of those and the framework, right? So we need to make it useful. We should have constructed. Sometimes we probably have no choice but to create a few apps and
Mhm.
Solomon is helping us, but it was hopefully there'll be more people like Solomon, just voluntarily help us. I
Yeah.
don't want them to do it out of the good heart, but they also see it's beneficial for their business, right? So that's what I like to see happen is just turn GPT script into something that's really cool to something that's really useful.
And I said that was the last question. I lied. So I just wanted to know, last week you were at KubeCon,
Yeah.
and how was the reception there? Did people come up to you thinking you were doing the same thing as before? And when you
Oh, no,
talked
no,
about this,
no, no. I think because we've been to a few KubeCons already, they a lot of them knew us.
but they know about the pivot is what I was
They know a
wondering.
lot of them knew about the pivot. Obviously,
Okay.
there also a lot of first time attendees to KubeCon, so they've never seen us. But it was very well received. I mean, the good thing with AI is a lot of people don't work on the AI, so it's probably not the ideal audience. But
Hmm.
but then people all are interested in it, but also the concept of GPT script is very simple, right? Like
Hmm.
we're not presenting something that's super technical. By the way, that's the way it should be. Like I always
Right.
tell people, like when internet got started, like before internet, like you had to know TCP/IP, you had to know like C programming to, send some message from one side to another. But with internet, all of a sudden, like everyone understands, like it's not rocket science to set up a web server and install a web browser. So I think it's kind of a bit like that. Like, even though they realize I'm not yet doing that, but
Hmm.
everyone's like, I think we opened a lot of people's eyes. It's like, oh,
Of
I can get into
possibilities.
that space.
Yeah, I think it's just layers of abstraction that you put on there to hide all that stuff from folks.
I think.
I don't know how my TV works. I just click it on and then I change channels. I don't need to know what's behind it. But yeah, no, I think that's very true. And the more that you can focus on that, like I said, it sparks things in people's minds. So, well, Sheng Liang, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. And as I said, I'm really interested in circling back in a while
Yeah,
and hearing how you all are doing, and if you've pivoted again, or if you're still doing the same thing.
absolutely. That's the fun.
All righty,
Bye.
take care.
Thank you.
Bye.